maybe just make a comment, maybe a brief comment about 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, just for contrast.
For me, the vintage I remember very well about the vine growing, and for me, it's always when I talk about the vintage, is not necessarily the profile of the wine, but how the profile of the season was, and just like 16, very cold, fresh, a lot of mildew, really hard to work. At the end, late harvest, so it's a bit austere, but super complex, super details, super precise. 17, easy vine growing, but a lot of rain arriving before the harvest. So a lot of botrytis, rich, powerful, a little bit of the glycerol materials, sometimes a little too large, but very energetic. So very interesting vintage, but not for all the growers. 18 is like super easy in vine growing and winemaking, and even with quite good volumes. Everywhere in Europe, it was like more or less 25% more grapes than normal. I'd say that it's a sexy vintage. It's rich, open, generous, very charming. But sometimes when it's too charming, maybe you lose a little bit of delicacy. So that's not my preference in terms of vintage. But hopefully, the works that we did, grower like us, in the vines, that permit to have this kind of personality and freshness. So there is some 18 from like the Burgundy, I remember. The reds was just cherry fruit and nothing else in terms of finesse and digestibility. 19, but in fact, during the tasting, I was tasting the Empreinte 19. This is what arrived on the market before next year. We disgorged last December, and that was the first bottle that we opened with a journalist this week. 19, that was the first time that we had the sunburn. On the 10th of July, 43 degrees Celsius, and we had a lot of the grapes. We never saw that. The grapes was on the west exposition. The grapes completely burned because of too much dryness and hot temperature. So the grapes was not looking well, nice at all on the press. But in terms of quality, a lot of concentration, and even more also a lot of acidity and energy. So for sure, one of the very, very interesting vintage to keep and to drink also. 20, very well balanced. It's the good kids, everything well in place. I think the problem with 20 is that it was the COVID moment, and there was some people in Champagne thinking that it's the end of the world and nobody will drink champagne anymore. So they try to reduce the cost production, and they don't make smart decision in terms of timing of picking, etc. We had during this harvest a big difference between phenolic maturity and technologic maturity. The technologic maturity is how much sugar you have in the grapes, in the juice. And the phenolic maturity is which kind of flavors do you have. So for me, of course, we need to have a minimum of sugar in the grapes, but also we need to have the flavors in place. And the Chardonnay was really taking a lot of time in the 20. So for us, it was the longest harvest that we did, more than 22 days. Then 21, until now, 21 was the most difficult vintage, the season that we had, because in terms of rain, it was 300 millimeters of rain just in the month of June. So a lot of mildew. So the grapes was difficult to create. But at the end, it's a personality that I really love. For me, it will be a vintage, super fine and elegant, very precise, a bit like 13. 13, when it was arriving on the market, people say, oh, no, it's too fresh, it's not enough rich and body with too much largeness. Today, there was some people say, oh, this is one of the best fine and elegant vintage. Maybe it takes time for 21. 22, super open, generous, rich in alcohol, rich in flavors, but also is different than 18. I think I prefer 22 because you have the concentration, but also you have the contrast also working well, I think, with the freshness from the terroir, but it's a year of grower. I mean, it's all the works you did in the vines, that's the very positive answer with this kind of vintage. 23, easy season, but everything was doing super easily during the vine growing, but 1 month before the harvest, rain. On the beginning, we were quite happy because it was giving us more grapes, more volumes, but it was too much volumes. Like normally the grapes, it's 130 grams in average for one grapes. The record was in 2005 that it was 180 grams, and in 23 it was more than 220 grams. So you imagine that there was some dilution. So for that, for us, it was a lot of something not really common, and we have to really take some risk in terms of waiting, of making also a lot of selection. The sorting in the vines was very, very important. So for me, one of the very difficult vintage. We'll see. It's early to know. It's too early to know because 23, it's still, even for the non-vintage, it's not yet on the market. For the vintage, we have a lot to wait. I don't know how it will develop. Yeah. And 24, again, it's early, but 21 was the more difficult vintage season, but now 24 for sure is on the top. We had mostly 1 year of rain. From February to October 24, it was rain all the time. So super hard, super difficult for us, and I imagine for the vines the same. But at the end, the quality of and the personality inside of the 24, they will be not high in volumes, but in terms of concentration, it's super interesting. 24 is probably for me a mix between 12, 13, and 16.
Ah,
Wow.
okay.
I don't know if you like this kind of vintage, but
I love those vintages.
Voilà. So for me, it's the same.
So that vintage summary is gold. I'm gonna create a separate, shorter video of just Aurelien's overview of the vintages 16 forward. That's
Yes.
an amazing nugget right there. That's great video.
It's an overview about growing and as a grower, not because you ask that for an oenologist, a chef de cave, he have a completely different, because he will talk about the low acidity or how it was for the Pinot Noir are better than the Chardonnay, etc. For me, because each plots, each domain is really unique, and I think the main goal it's the things that you are not taking in that you are not able to control is the weather, and I think this is what makes the vintage. For example, 24. What saves the vintage? It's like 2 weeks before the beginning of the harvest. It was on the beginning of September. We had 4 degrees Celsius on the morning and 15 degrees on the afternoon. This contrast between the cold temperature and the higher temperature in the afternoon, just that, I think this is that will create really the quality and the complexity of the flavors. Yeah. But this is really personal.
That's fantastic.
That vintage linear thinking there was just gold. That was gold, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make that a separate video, Todd. That's.
I'm going to have both for 100%. It's great. I was just drooling while he was talking about it. So we're right at time now, so we should wrap it up so he can actually go to bed. He's got to get up early. He's a farmer, remember?
I remember. Aurelien.